Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another Destiny video. Bungie just finished their third and final Age of Triumph livestream, and the focus for today was of course the returning raid gear, the ornaments, the returning weapons, also how elemental primaries will work, as well as some notes on Sandbox Changes. So as always, if you guys missed the stream or you just want a super condensed rundown, then this is everything you need to know. So if you do enjoy this, you do find it helpful, then a like would be super appreciated. Also, once you've seen the armor sets, let me know in the comments down below which one you guys are most looking forward to. So I'm going to break this video down into 3 different categories: gear, weapons, and sandbox. So let's start off with the gear. If you guys have seen all the information up until this point, you will of course know that the raids are coming up to max light level. So as of next week, when Age of Triumph drops on March the 28th, then all 4 raids, Vault of Glass, Cratos End raid, King's Fall, and Raster Machine, will be 390 light, and of course from that you'll be able to get 400 light gear. That means you can then go after whichever raid set you like the most, and that can become your end game set, so that when you kind of see out Destiny and you wrap it up, that'll basically be your final Guardian. And while Wrath of the Machine is of course the current one, and most of us have a complete set, for the previous raids, the older ones that are of course not quite up to the current light level, those ones will give us a chance to get brand new gear. So in the live stream they basically went through all different sets, showing us what they look like with one of the new ornaments. Now do of course bear in mind, one thing they did say is that all raid sets will have 2 ornament slots. So in the stream they only showed off 1 ornament. Now I don't know whether the other one will be equally as outlandish or whether that one will be a lot more, say, modest. But either way, for the time being, this is what we have. So starting off with the Vault of Glass gear, this that you see in front of you is the new gear with ornaments on. Now this looks really, really awesome, and they said the design philosophy behind this is to basically make it so that you've effectively, as a Guardian, gone back into the raid multiple times to the point where as you go back in, you begin to kind of collect trophies and, you know, sort of parts from your enemies, so to speak, and you become a little bit more sort of vexified in the process, hence why the Hunter has like a robotic leg, the Warlock has these sort of harpy tentacles in the back, also with robotic feet, and the Titan has this sort of Vex shield on the back of him, which is the thing that people have been calling a Wi-Fi signal. Does look quite a lot like that, but these sets are so awesome. I've said before that the Vault of Glass set is one of my favourites, and this definitely still stands. I'm genuinely a very big fan of the Hunter stuff, so I can't wait to check that out. Now, of course, the observant ones out there will notice that the Hunter is indeed wielding Fatebringer. In fact, the person that is acting as the cameraman is also wielding that, but we'll speak more about that in just a second when we speak about weapons. So for the time being, let's focus on gear. Next up, talking about the Cratos End raid gear. Now this is a set that, when it was first introduced, I was never a huge fan of it, to be honest. I wasn't like a massive fan of the design. I know the Warlocks had a really cool sort of run with this one, but as a Hunter, I felt like we got a little bit of the short straw. However, this new version is so unbelievably over the top. They all have this pulsating green energy, and their sort of philosophy behind it was that it sort of stems from, you know, all the different hive that you kill, and you basically sort of build up this energy to the point where your armor then absorbs so much that it can't contain it, so it then breaks through the armor, and that's where these sort of like glowing green pulsating energy comes from. One of the cool things about this set, and also the King's Fall set that we'll take a look at next, is that if you get hit, the energy effect disappears, and it then sort of rebuilds itself again. So it's kind of a good way for, say, a teammate to know that you've been hit, because of course, you know, your lights will disappear, and they could then potentially use that as a means to, you know, come and help you out, or warn the teammates and whatnot. But either way, that is how the armor behaves. After that, turning our attention to the King's Fall raid gear. Again, the similar principle to before, in that these have pulsating energy. This time around it's blue energy. It's not quite as outlandish as the previous one, so it doesn't necessarily break out the armor, but you can see these sort of cracks appearing all over the sets. Again, if you shoot them, this energy disappears and it rebuilds itself again. I am actually a huge fan of the Hunter cloak on this one. I never used to wear the one back on King's Fall before, because again, I wasn't really a big fan of it, but the sort of spine it's got down the top of the head, or the sort of almost horn-like thing, makes it look almost like a dinosaur, so I actually really do like that one. I think what I'm probably going to do, in the end, is just collect all these different sets and assemble like a really cool mix set, where I take like the cape from this, the robotic arms from the Vex set, and take something else from, you know, Raster Machine or something, and try and make a really cool mix set. But either way, that is how this gear behaves. And then finally, turning our attention to the Raster Machine gear, because of course this is one of the new ones, and it doesn't already have an existing ornament slot where the red light kind of glows out of it, but in the other ornament slots you have this set here, which again, following a similar sort of idea behind the sort of Cratos End stuff, where you've got this energy pulsating out. They did say that this is the most outlandish in terms of, actual visual effects they have on armor. So you can of course see this energy again, pulsating around the belt or around the shoulders, and to a certain extent it's almost like the armor is sort of shattering over the shoulders, so you get this cool fractal kind of effect as well. So quite cool. I'm, in truth, not a huge fan of this. I was never really a massive fan of the Raster Machine gear anyway. It's a little bit sort of weird and angular for my liking. So the collector in me will obviously still go after this, but I don't necessarily see myself wearing this one too much. But either way, those are the returning raid sets with the ornaments. Now also worth mentioning, with regards to the ornaments, these do not require specific ornaments, so you don't necessarily have to go and do Cratos End raid to get the Crota ornament for the Crota gear. Anytime you play the raid in the weekly playlist, you will get an Age of Triumph ornament, and that can be applied to any and all of these gear sets. So as we know, week 1 is Cratos End raid. You could then do that, and if you decided you didn't like the ornaments, maybe they're a little bit too outlandish for you, then you could hold on to that ornament and wait till, say, you start collecting the Vault of Glass gear, and you can of course then go and apply them there. So that way, at least on a weekly basis, you can begin earning your ornaments, and they can then benefit any of the sets that you like. However, there is one more set before we start speaking about weapons. This is of course the bespoke set for Age of Triumph. This is of course a lot more modest, and it's actually based on existing armor, so it's more of a kind of reskin, repaint, so to speak. But the class items for this set all come from the Speaker's Quest. So we saw last week that basically when you load to the tower and you start Age of Triumph, you will basically have a quest from the Speaker. And if you follow that quest all the way through, you will get the class items. Now, all of this gear has chroma on it, so the glowing white back to the Hunter Cloak can, of course, be coloured. So you could have green, pink, red, whatever colours there are. So that is pretty cool for the customization side of things, because on things like the legs, there'll be these little symbols that you can, of course, get to glow through. But for the remaining armour pieces, they come from the boxes. But don't forget, you can get 3 per week, so there is actually a pretty good chance to collect it, but that is where they come from. So armour from boxes, class item from the quest. So that is everything on the gear. Now let's talk about weapons. One of the most important things is, of course, the return of elemental primaries. We know with the raids coming back that all the raid weapons are coming back, so favourites like Fatebringer, Vision of Confluence, Praetor's Revenge, some of the weapons from, King's Fall, from Cratos End, etc. And what they're basically going to be doing is they will all be coming back in their legendary forms, so things like specials and heavies, which already carried elements, will still fundamentally behave the same. However, for primaries, they're doing something rather interesting. So, in things like Vault of Glass or Cratos End Raid, where they previously had elemental primaries, if you then get a legendary drop in one of those raids, it will not have an element. However, they're basically taking a leaf out of the Trials of Osiris book, whereby there's also going to be an adept version of the primary. So take Fatebringer for example. There's a standard legendary Fatebringer with no element. That has a chance to drop in the raid, as it always has done. However, the adept version is actually an exotic. It will have a different ornament, hence why this Fatebringer looks different. It will have the corresponding element, so in this case it's arc damage, and this will only drop when the raid is in the weekly playlist. So, as I said before, we know that week 1 will be Cratos End Raid. So, any of the primaries in Cratos End Raid, if you want to get it as an exotic, then if you're doing it in the weekly playlist, it'll have a chance to drop the adept version. If you get that, it will be exotic, it'll look slightly different, and it will have the element. If you just get the regular version, the legendary version, it will not. So that is basically how the return is working. Now that's of course very simple for things like Vault of Glass and Cratos End, which previously had elements, but for the raids like King's Fall and Raster Machine, where their primaries were post the change, so they never actually had elements in the first place, they are also making changes to those. There will be adept versions of both those raid primaries, so again, you can get exotic versions of things like the Scout Rifle in Wrath of the Machine, or the Auto Rifle in King's Fall. Anything like that can again drop in the same way. So just to reiterate, they will only drop the adept versions if it's in the weekly playlist. Do of course bear in mind, once it's been in the weekly playlist, it will go to the director, so if say, week 2, you want to go back and do Cratos End Raid, but it's not in the weekly playlist, you can still go and select the 391 from the map, but that will only drop the regular gear. It'll drop the gear that you can ornament, it'll drop the weapons, but it will not drop the adept versions. Only when it's in the playlist do you have a chance to get those. So, that is how elemental primaries are returning as exotics, which also explains why in the Age of Triumph book there is actually a node for collecting quite a large number of exotic weapons, and people did begin to ask questions with regards to, how's this going to work, are there going to be a lot of cool new exotics added, and now that we know this, we can of course attribute that number to those raid primaries. However, one thing worth calling out is specifically for Cratos End Raid, Black Spindle and Black Hammer. If you guys played back when Cratos End Raid came out, you will of course know that one of the best weapons that everyone wanted was Black Hammer. That was a legendary sniper rifle, and it was incredibly powerful. Of course, when the light level was raised, that was left behind. And then later on they added Black Spindle, which was the exotic version, not quite as powerful, but fundamentally does the same thing, albeit a little bit less potent. Now that is unfortunately the one thing that is not going to be changing, so Black Hammer is not going to make a return. So for Cratos End Raid, you're going to have to make do with Black Spindle. Of course it still has ornaments and whatnot, you can still boost it up to 400, but to quote Deej, Black Hammer has basically been consumed by Cratos End Raid. It is never making a return, so if you have it back from the day, fair enough, hold on to it as a keepsake, but there will not be a 400 version of Black Hammer. All the other weapons are coming back, as they would do, but that one is not. Also, speaking of returning weapons, of course, there's Vex Mythoclast. Again, we've seen that with the ornament. Necrochasm, an interesting one. This will, of course, tie into when we speak about the Sandbox Changes, but auto rifles have been buffed again. Necrochasm is actually pretty good. And if you cast your mind back to when it was used before, it basically procced the perk where it caused targets to explode if you landed a precision kill. However, now that's been changed to just regular kills, so you can body shot, leg shot, foot shot if you want to. Provided you kill the enemy, it will then explode, and that explosion will, of course, then damage targets in the vicinity. So it's a lot easier to proc that talent, and of course then, works quite nicely with the weapon. So that is another change. And of course there was also another quick look at some ornaments for Dragon's Breath, the No Land Beyond, and of course Soros. Soros actually has two. It has the black and yellow one we saw a glimpse of in Monday's preview teaser, and also this one, which is basically an inverted colour scheme of the original. So with that out of the way, speaking very quickly about these Sandbox Changes, there will of course be detailed patch notes on these, and these will drop on Monday when the update goes live, which will be 10 AM Bungie time. But a few kind of footnotes from this. Auto rifles, as mentioned, have had a boost. Necrochasm is very good now, apparently, but they've essentially now got more damage, but a harsher damage fall off. So again, they won't be very good at range, but when you are close, they will be more potent. Hand cannons, their range has been dialed back ever so slightly, so this is a nerf, but it is only a tiny nerf. They've basically dialed back the range by about 3 meters, and the reason they've done that is to, again, put it in a better position with the existing primaries, so that they all feel viable in their kind of pool. Blink recovery is dialed back a little bit, so you guys know that basically your HUD disappears when you go to blink. That still remains, but the time the HUD is not visible has been reduced ever so slightly. Scori's Revenge, an interesting one. This now only triggers after you have full super and after you've landed a kill. So let's just say, for example, you have full super. As it exists right now, you would then basically begin regenerating your entire team indefinitely. Whereas what will happen as of next week will be that you have max super, you will then need to get a kill, and that will then trigger the effect, and that effect will last for 1 minute. So of course in PvE, that's very easy, you just keep killing random enemies, and that will of course keep going, so it will essentially happen infinitely. However, in something like Trials of Osiris, where of course it was a problem because people were camping just to wait for their super to come back, it then means that because you need to get a kill, it'll be a lot harder to abuse that. So that is the change to Scori's. Sidearms will now respawn with ammo as they always have done, but only with 1 magazine, so they won't have any kind of spare rounds in the magazine. They will just have 1 clip, so once you've used that, then it's out, so they won't be quite as potent as before. Also, I think there's a slight reduction to damage. Special crates will now instantly reload your weapon like heavies, so again, if you run up to them with like an empty shotgun, the second you've opened the crate, your shotgun will be full and you'll be ready to go. And that, my friends, is pretty much it. There are a few kind of other additional tiny notes, but generally speaking, the kind of granularity and the details will come in the patch notes that drop on Monday. So final note, Age of Triumph itself will be dropping at 10 AM Pacific time on Tuesday, 28th of March. That is 6 PM if you guys are in the UK, because I believe the clocks go back this weekend. And of course, anywhere else in the world, then, translate your time accordingly. But that is it. That is your live stream summary. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, drop them down below. But thanks for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.